Hey everyone, in today's little video I'm going to be showing you the Zacuto Z Finder Pro with the FX6 attachment basically. Quite expensive kit and there's not really a lot of videos online showing sort of how this stuff kind of balances. The actual Z Finder attachment itself is this piece here. So this whole actual EVF bit actually just pops off if you pull it hard enough, and then of course it comes as standard with this mount here, which is paramount for the FX6 because the FX6's design. When it comes to running EVFs and things, this stuff is really important. So I'm currently running one of the Nicey Rig metal mounts here. The FX6 handle has quite a lot of physical flex on it. You need to get the Bright Tangerine mount that can go from the plate here up to here, that will add rigidity. This is a tilter cage, but the actual extra bracket can actually support this cage. The normal plastic mount here actually adds a surprising amount of physical flex. This metal one helps reduce the flex of an EVF, so that's important. How this mount works basically is it just clips onto the bottom, clips up to the top like so, very awkwardly, just kind of clamps on like so. So that is essentially how it looks. Now, one of the downsides, of course, with this mount, as you probably already know, it's not actually strong enough to hold it. The magnets or the grooves inside the actual included mount isn't strong enough for an EVF. So you either need to get an attachment called the flop stop, so it will make a stronger magnets, but it is grooved to each step. So this doesn't obviously really work. If it did work, you have a lot of potential room for positioning. You can push this bar up here and push it out. So if you had a solution like Bright Tangerine, and of course it's cool because you can sort of flip this in for packaging, which is quite nice. This doesn't actually work. So what we have to do, we have to put it in that position, grab the excess mount. This goes basically into here, it rotates down, clicks in here, and then it gets threaded on. Now that's all attached there. You now just pop. And there we go. So obviously it's quite a strange design because essentially it's just two different threads that you can pop one in either further or closer. This is sort of essentially makes it really loose. This makes it tight, but there's enough friction that you can really easily have it there and it's not going to flop or do anything weird. You can flick this up to have access to the whole screen. But as you can tell, without a handle support, there is a lot of just EVF flex going on here. If I try and support the handle, there's still a lot. It's a heavy EVF, to be honest with you. One of the just really bizarre design features of this mount is that of course it can only hinge on this point. There's no secondary hinge. You'll often find yourself sometimes wishing you had the EVF here, but then you can angle the EVF that way. I'm glad they sell this device because this on here does work really well. But I do feel like it kind of feels pointless. Like you might as well always buy the extra £200 attachment to have more hinging points. Again, this rig is designed to be used like the FX6 was born, just really basic and simple. But if you were going to shoulder mount with this kind of configuration, it matches pretty well if you wanted to just run your shoulder right near the back plate. So even with a big V-lock on the back, a smallish lens, you know, the tilter cage here, when it's on your, it's actually on your shoulder, it feels pretty good in the sense of that I've got access to ND and certain buttons, and my head isn't up really high. Again, you wish you had that extra articulation where you could push down and whatever, but this is actually really comfy. Your camera is still front heavy, which means that even when you're running like an extension arm, this grip or a wooden grip, because of the weight of this and the fact that the camera is still front heavy, it's not a truly balanced, you get a lot of torque against your hand because this camera is really EVF heavy. When you're sagging, your hand has to create more torque to keep your camera steady. It's really uncomfortable. This is so much torque. And even though you're supported with your shoulder here, and you're supported with your eyepiece, you're still creating torque on your wrist. It's uncomfortable. So you still need to consider a secondary grip. Then it feels amazing, but you are straining your back because you're still front heavy. But it is nice. You still need to consider a nubbly grip or something with some rods to be able to really stabilize. That means that the bigger the lens, the worse this gets. So you need to consider smaller lenses. If you're going to put like a D0 35 to 80 on here, it's just extra weight. The dilemma then you get into is you have to then have 150 watt batteries, you have to have double V-lock plates, you have to have a D-drive like transmission on the back. I have all those things. As the camera gets heavier, it means the camera becomes only practical to shoot on your shoulder. But that's kind of the dilemma with shooting on the shoulder anyway. Of course, if you are shooting, you can articulate this up, which means that you can obviously really easily cradle this if you had a lens on it, and it feels quite nice. With 15mm rods, it feels better. So you can always flip up the screen as well and operate like this. I don't know, the bloody fifth or fourth thing you have to think about is stubby lenses with a matte box. This starts to become pretty close to constantly intervening with the matte box position, especially when you flip this up. It creates even more leverage, and of course with wide angle lenses, this can then start to be shown in frame, because as you have it really low, you've got this huge piece that comes out. But let's try the second position to kind of show you where the EVF will sit. When you go to the second position, you are not straining your cable completely, but you do get tighter on this EVF cable. So this is the second position. As you can tell, it's way more further forward. You can see the cable is a bit tighter, but it's not tight enough that it can still go low and it can still go high. It's not, high is getting closer to the strain, but yeah. This is where you get to the point where you're going to be able to balance for a longer lens, and this is where your balance point really becomes clear over the real center of gravity of the camera, where the whole camera goes completely back on your shoulder, but the actual physical weight of the camera is now actually physically on my shoulder to the point where it's almost balancing. Again, if you had a lens and a V-lock, this would balance really well. The original position was about here, so you were kind of weighing the camera up here. It's not actually straining your back because you're not lifting the camera constantly, it's balancing on my back. That's one of the really good benefits with this position here. And this actually works really, really well. The downside, camera settings are like just not in the right spot. Trying to find stuff is really not very nice. Plus, if you have a big lens, your hand is like right up tight to your face, which I don't love. But again, you still get the torque if you had a hand grip, but it's so much better than it was. Of course, with this position though, you end up with a few more dilemmas. Again, matte boxes. This hinges all the way down. It will get in the way of every matte box you put on it, basically, unless you have a really big lens. But of course, for wide lenses, 35, 24s, this is going to get even further of an issue. On top of that, because it's now further away on the camera body, there's sort of even more leverage that you have to deal with, and a little bit more flex. Because of the whole hinge mechanism that goes on in this whole rig here, normally on the FS7 and FX9, you can actually just unclip the whole EVF and just pop it off and put it on the floor. You don't actually have to have it, but on this you can't. The EVF metal is physically attached. Essentially, if you wanted to quickly go from I'm shooting with an eyepiece to actually I kind of want the whole thing gone, there's no solution for it. Not with this whole mounting solution. I personally think that this eyepiece as a whole is probably one of my more favorite solutions as a camera package, in my opinion, because of the size of it is quite nice. I think it's a bit too heavy for my personal needs. I think the best solution, if you are really curious about wanting to use this eyepiece, which I think is totally legit because it really is a great AVF, your best solution is the Bright Tangerine top plate for this. It will fit in this thread here. You need to buy, unfortunately, potentially either the full axle kit that they sell, but basically what it does, for those who are just curious, basically you want to be able to strip off all of this metal here. So now you're free, so you've got rid of that. You want to get the hinge for the Bright Tangerine, which will clamp onto the monitor itself. That then has its own solution for a 15mm rod to go onto a rod. So it will go onto the side there. And then that will allow you to obviously use the EVF like it is, but it won't sag because the mounting system is better. But when you suddenly don't want the EVF, you can obviously just unclip it completely and suddenly not have it. The full axle kit for the Bright Tangerine, you can then also benefit from the design to basically put the monitor up here, here. You get full basically hingement pretty much of wherever the monitor you want it to be. I think that's, to be honest, like more or less the ultimate solution. But I hope this video kind of serves as quite a useful little piece for anyone who has been really curious about actually buying one.